All righty, we'll go ahead and get started. I want to be respectful of everyone's time this afternoon. So I'm Jamie Davis from Bowen Health, and usually these presentations are done by Ted Westeroff. I know he spent many years with everyone and providing you with mental health support. And so I'm here to fill in for Ted because he actually is no longer with Bowen Health. Some of you may know that, you may not. He was with Bowen Health for 30 years. So he really had 3 decades of being able to serve and enjoyed every minute of it. But he had decided that it was time for a change. So he's now at Parkview. So if anyone has any connections to Parkview, you probably will run into Ted. Because we all know he's a community guy, right? He knows a lot of people. But Ted and Tracy were able to kind of compare notes in preparation for our time together today. And they decided that, workplace and life balance, seem to make sense because it's something that everyone has in common. You all work together and you all have your personal life as well. So, but as we all know, what connects Bowen Health to you is your employee assistance program. So how many here have been here more than a year? 5 years, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. Okay, all right. So who can tell me how many counseling sessions do each one of you have available to you? 6, that's right. You each have 6 prepaid counseling sessions available to you. And just to give you a little bit of information, in addition to that, the services are private and confidential. Sometimes people are hesitant to use the benefits because they are a more private person and they would prefer it to stay that way. So the only thing that we provide to your employer is numbers and a little bit other, referral process, those types of things. But we would have never hoped for COVID, but since COVID, we were open to virtual services as well, and we can still provide those. You don't have to use the county that you work in or that you reside in. You can use any county. If you prefer to go in person, we can certainly do that still. Or if you're one of those people that has a really hectic schedule and the virtual works better for you, that's available still as well. So, and on the back of the table before you leave, I do have some employee assistance program fact sheets that have all the information I just gave you at the bottom. You'll notice there's an 800 number. If you decide you want to utilize the benefits, just let them know you're an employee here. And also there's a website. You can use that as well. If you do use the website, you will click on schedule an appointment, and then they will be in contact with you to get you scheduled. So that's the information on your employee assistant program. We all know that we always were Bowen Center for many years, and now we're Bowen Health. And in case you're not aware of what that change represents is that for years we were all mental health, and now we've added medical. We're now considered also a federally qualified health center, which means the medical services we provide is anything you go to your primary care physician for. So that's when we become Bowen Health, but we still offer all the same services under mental health, because sometimes when people hear Bowen Health, they're like, does that mean, it sounds like Parkview Health or Lutheran Health, does that mean you don't do mental health services anymore? And no, we still do both. And we still offer the same services on counseling. We've got the individual, we've got couples, family, substance, transitional living, and under the mental health issues that we, help people through in challenging times, which we all go through. You have your anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder. We all at some point in time probably experience trauma in our lives. So we still offer all of those services. So some takeaways today is we're going to talk about strategies for resiliency, personal and professional boundary risk factors. That kind of goes into that area of the balance between work life and home life, personal. We're going to talk a little bit about stress management and then overcome stigma that, sometimes we believe about our self-care that can keep us from providing our own overall self-care the best that we can. So those are some areas that we're going to go over today. But first of all, I wanted to spend just a couple of minutes and the person beside you, or if you're kind of in a group and you know each other, I want you to take just a minute and I want you to share with each other, what was your first job? Hey, go. All righty, let's see what you guys came up with. So who would like to share what your neighbor shared about their first job, with their permission, of course? Who would like to share? Don't be shy.
You worked at Dairy Queen?
Dairy Queen? Oh, yeah, nice. Yeah.
I can still do a curl. Can you still do a curl?
Yeah.
I haven't tried, but
Well, that's a place where most people come when they're happy. Ice cream and happiness go together, right? Yeah. Absolutely. What else? Some of the first. Okay, so Dollar General, farm, yeah. And you said delivering newspapers, yeah. Go through a lot of breaks in your car, don't you?
I drove my bicycle.
Oh, you did your bicycle.
It has been a few days.
Yeah. That's awesome, though. Oh my goodness. So you got exercise.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. How long did it take you to do your route?
An hour and a half.
Hour and a half.
I did our whole town.
Oh my goodness. Did you do that after school then, or?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That's awesome. How about back row? Nursing home. Okay. Awesome. Very good.
The rest of us were food.
That's always a good place to start. So yeah. All right. I want to take another moment and I want you guys to share again with each other something interesting about yourself in a positive way, something that you think would be fun or important for somebody to know about you. Okay, something positive about yourself, and go.
That would be interesting. Yeah. He does. I can wrestle when you know, that.
All right, let's go ahead. What did you guys come up with on this one? Who would like to share with the neighbor's permission? Thing over here. You guys finished up first. Be a hobby, maybe your favorite music. What do you guys come up with? Anybody? Quiet crew. Okay, guys, come on.
We had this interesting.
Okay.
So,
All right.
Tracy actually lived in Peru, South America for 3 years.
Okay.
Amy's learning Spanish right now. So
Oh.
she's kind of,
Wouldn't it be funny if we started speaking Spanish to her?
Exactly. Can you guys hear him? No. Can you say a little bit louder?
yeah, so Tracy actually lived in Peru, South America, and then Amy is learning Spanish right now. So it's kind of a hobby.
Yeah.
So I said we can bring Marsha out and then we can start speaking
Yeah.
Totally. I think you should do that.
How about you guys here or back row? Anybody?
Greenland,
Oh, I didn't know that.
They always say in high school.
Okay.
we're gonna need to perform it.
Wait, Lisa, well, and karate, we're not talking about mine.
You should be over here. You guys can all compare notes later. Yeah. Oh, that's good.
Amy's getting married.
She what?
She's getting married real soon.
Oh.
Yes, and they bought a house.
Well, congratulations. That's awesome. Isn't it fun to have something to look forward to? Yeah, it really is. And you know, we're gonna talk stress today a little bit, and you know, there's good stress, you know, and that's one of those areas. So absolutely. So we're gonna go over some information that's gonna help you understand why do we talk about God, or why do we try to talk about personal? Because it all goes together on this balance that we're gonna talk about. So we're gonna start with questions about kind of battle of the brains here, okay? So what is the first most common question people ask each other when they first meet each other? Say that louder.
What do you do for a living?
Yes, what else? Name? Yeah, yep.
Where are you from?
Yes, where are you from? Yes, absolutely, you guys nailed it, absolutely. Those are the common things that we ask people, you know, whenever we're first, you know, name. We talked about that, you know, sometimes, how are you? You know, that's another one. But then, you know, what do you do? Or what's your occupation? Absolutely. And so this tells us something about our society when we first meet someone, you know, kind of, you know, we're going to talk about why do we ask people what we ask them? So one thing we all have in common here, we're all in people serving professions, right? And so I want to challenge you just for a second, just to think about, okay, we all, you know, are in people serving professions, and what helps us when coping with challenges? What are your coping skills? What are things that are helpful for you? So part of that challenge in thinking about that is thinking about resiliency. There is a lot of folks, May is Mental Health Month, right? and through the suicide prevention and also the Center for Disease Control, they're focusing a lot on mental health and self-care, but there also just seems to be this focus right now on resiliency. If you were to describe or define resiliency, how would you define it? You want to give it a shot? Yes. The ability to bounce back. I always think of a rubber band. You stretch a rubber band out and it always bounces back, right? And I think the reason that they want to us to consider what true resiliency is because sometimes we bounce back. We have a challenge, we have a trauma, we have a crisis, but we get through it and then we're off and running. It's like, whew, oh, I made it through that. I'm doing better now, but we're not really mindful of how. How do we bounce back? And so, and the advantages of that is that, you know, we're all individual, we're all unique. And so it's going to be different for each one of us, right? And so, but the thing that's helpful is that when we're mindful of how we bounce back and that resiliency, then down the road, if we have another challenge, then we're, oh yeah, that worked, you know, so I'm going to try that again instead of just completely not really paying attention to what got you through. And then also too, a focus on, you know, you guys are cohorts, you guys work together. And so, you know, how can we help each other out, right? And then in doing that, we can think of, you know, what are some protective actions that we can take that tend to work best for us and for, like if you work in the same departments together or you work close, you know, with one another. And what that leads us to in those protected actions is just kind of boundaries. What's the work life and the personal life? What are boundaries? What are risk factors? Okay. So I love this because this gives us a really nice visual of different areas. The first one is going to be what we call our moderate risk. Okay. And so this is moderate risk. This is personal life and professional life. What do you notice about the circles? No overlap. They're completely separate, right? When we have our work and our personal life completely separate, what could be a risk in that would contribute to being a risk of not being moderately unhealthy in relationships? Anybody got a guess? If you're completely disconnected, no emotional investment, right? Yeah. I mean, if you're not connected, there's just no emotional investment. And that's what we consider at the moderate risk. Okay, so lowest risk. We're going to go from moderate to lowest here. All right, what do you notice about circles now? Yes, they're connected, yes. But there's just that small amount that they're connected, right? Yeah, absolutely. That means that there's some separation and then there's some connectedness. There's more separation than connectedness, but there's that small amount. And that's what we consider our lowest risk. And that's the healthy investment, okay, when balancing the two. All right, you guys ready for the high risk burnout? Yeah. What do you notice about this circle? There's no separation, right? No, there's no separation. So if you don't separate at all personal life from your profession or your work life, what's the risk? What you guys' guess is a risk?
Losing connection to family.
I didn't hear you. High anxiety. Yeah, we're gonna talk about that in a minute. Yeah. Is there any respite? Like if you have if something happens at work and it causes stress and anxiety, right? That there's no separation from work and personal life. There's no separation, so there's no break. There's no respite between the two. And that's what really can put us in risk for burnout, right? Because there's no separation. All right, and so that's the unhealthy investment. All righty, so we talked about risk factors, which lead into boundaries, right? We talked about what those represent. So boundaries can identify a clear difference between personal and professional roles and your life, right? You all have your roles in life and in your jobs. And some are policy determined and some are self-determined. And the ones that are policy determined, those are set in place in mind for your well-being. But do you think that the self-determined role boundaries that you set, do you think they're different for each one of us? Yeah, absolutely. I can tell you at Bowen Health, you know, on a spectrum, you know, I try to stay right in the middle the best I can. But, you know, and there's always that balance of, you know, somebody's really wanting, you know, support and, you know, and keeping those boundaries in place versus, you know, somebody who just kind of sits alone all the time and you're concerned about them. But yeah, it's different for each one of us. And, you know, sometimes people, you know, are willing to invest more on one side than the other, but just keep in mind that, you know, the policy determined ones are there for your protection, and you have leadership in place. If you have problems in those areas of policy and procedure, a lot of times your HR generalists are there to help, or your managers. That's what they're there for, though, is to help protect you. But then also, too, you have the whole personal preference, and you know, what's might be best for us might not sometimes be best for others as well. So, all right. So we mentioned a little bit over here about stress. So we're going to talk about stress now. So if you hear somebody or you're talking about stress, you usually hear them talk about stress and starts with an A. Anxiety. Yes, anxiety. Those two are usually in the same conversation together. So who can tell me the difference? What's the difference between stress and anxiety? Yes.
Stress is temporary, anxiety is long-term.
Okay, can be. Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. Yes.
Isn't like stress kind of like things causing it, and anxiety is like your reaction?
Got it. Perfect. Absolutely. I always say,
I have it, that's how I know.
yeah. But we learn, right? Absolutely. We learn. And so, yes, absolutely. Stress, I always think it's helpful to think of two words, both internal and external. Okay, stress is usually caused by some external. How many of you like to run into a spider or snake unexpected, right? Yeah. And that causes that internal anxiety, right? That we don't like that. We don't like to be startled. We don't like things close to us that could get on us. So yeah, that's the difference between the two. And then, but even with stress, we love updated information on stress. And there is facts out there that if a person thinks about stress in a positive way, they can live just as long as somebody that has a low stress life, okay? But if we think of stress, just the way we think about stress, if we think of it in a negative way, it can take as many as 20 years off of our life. So just the way we think about it has an effect on our life. So, but in order to do that, in order to think of stress as something positive, if we think about it as a gauge, okay, it can be helpful for us to know that stress can fulfill a very positive function in our life, right? So let's think about the gauges of stress, okay, that can happen physically, mentally, and then also emotionally, right? So that we try to separate those into different areas because those areas all exist. And sometimes we don't connect what areas they're under. And under each of those areas, there's signs and symptoms, okay? There's physical signs, as you can see up there, muscle pain, back and neck pain, you know, inability to eat, crying. Mental can be forgetfulness, you can't concentrate, confusion, and you can see the rest there. Emotional, that gets in your emotions part, you know, your anger, your fear, your guilt, irritability. Hopelessness is huge, okay? These are all our gauges. These are our signs and symptoms. Now, is there any signs and symptoms of anyone here that's never experienced any of these? There anybody here? Oh, we all experience these. And even though we all experience these, a true gauge, like what's something that you gauge in life? I always ask people, think about your car. What's a gauge in your life or in your car? Gas. Yes, that's a big one. And your check engine light, right? Well, if your gas gauge is on, you know, and you don't get gas, what happens? You run out of gas and then you can't go where you want to go. So if you think about these signs and symptoms as a gauge, if they're lasting way too long, it's like longevity, okay? Or if they just continue to get worse and worse and worse, okay? More than normal, like to the point where you're not really able to follow through on your normal routines. It's affecting your personal life. It's affecting your profession. That's why you have your EAP. That's why you have that extra support when you realize that, okay, I really think I need the extra support at this time in counseling. So, all right, so now we're going to think about our overall wellness, and we're going to start with physical, okay? We're going to talk about our physical self-care. And so I love these pictures here because the picture to your left was pre-COVID, right? And then the picture to your right was post-COVID, right? Now, why do you think they increased from 5 steps to 7 steps? What's hand washing considered? It's the most preventable thing for illnesses, right? Hand washing. We've all heard that, right? Yes. And even if the Center for Disease Control found it important enough to increase during and after COVID, that stresses the importance of our physical health, right? All righty. So now we're going to go over just some normal physical self-care that we all do, right? We all brush our teeth. We all bathe. We all wash our clothes, do our laundry. We all shower. Sometimes we wear cologne or perfume, sometimes on a regular basis, sometimes if we're going out on a special occasion or a date, right? And we have all these areas that we do our physical self-care in. So what happens if you don't brush your teeth for a year? Yeah. That would be one. Yeah, it's not good, right? Yeah, absolutely. It definitely has an impact on our physical health, right? And mental as well. But the key is to just understand that also too is how often do we do these things? How often does a normal person brush their teeth? At least once a day, right? Some twice. You know, how often does a person bathe a day? You know, maybe once in the winter and twice in the summer when they've been working out in the yard or, you know, have gotten overheated. You know, how often do people do their laundry? It's important to think about in the physical, how often do we do these things? And it's also important too to think about, okay, for our physical skills, they were taught early in life. Does anybody have your mom call you to remind you to brush your teeth? No. They were taught, right? And they were intentional. I mean, your mom or your dad or your caregiver, whoever they were, those skills were taught, and it was intentional for you to learn those and to do those on the normal time limit that for our overall health. And then, so they eventually became a routine. And then, you know, some are daily, some weekly, some monthly. All right, so now we're going to move into the pendulum's going to swing to the emotional care, right? So what does emotional care look like? We'll go ahead and get all these up here. Okay. Oh, sorry. Clicked it one too many times there. So you can see the area of emotional care. So let me ask you this. What were, or what's some of the most common first words we learn to say as infants and toddlers? Mom, dad,
No.
no, yeah, that always comes. And if you notice with the other, more recent generations, it's no with a finger. You got that sass that goes along with it. Yeah, absolutely. did we learn to say we were sad? We're angry? No, we didn't. And so, with the emotional, just think about, okay, the physical was taught, it was intentional, it became a routine, and we learned it and we practice it now. That emotional piece was missing when we were young. And for some adults, it's still hard for them to be in touch. So we're going to move into skills that we can think about. And also, too, if you guys have other ideas, please share them because we can learn from each other. But under the first skill, under emotional, social media is huge, right? Do you guys think there's pros and cons to social media? Yeah. What are some pros? Connection? Yeah, absolutely. What are some other pros? Over here? Yeah, we can learn, research. Yeah, we don't have to go to physical library. Yeah. So what are, those are some pros. What are some cons? She's like, it can be either side. Yeah. Very true. Would you all agree? Yeah, absolutely.
On it too long.
Too long.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness,
It's hard
yes.
to keep up with, because that's where I'm at. I haven't posted for 6 months. I haven't had time, so
Yeah.
I'm just trying to keep up.
You just gave up. Yeah.
I look occasionally.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There's so many pros and cons to it. So, but just keep it in mind, just if you find that you're on it longer than you really anticipated being on, or it's affecting your sleep or your relationships with others. We all know that people will text things they wouldn't say in person, and therefore it's not really real communication. And then that can hurt and do damage, and it can be misinterpreted. I didn't mean it that way, but it was, somebody can be hurt for years over something that wasn't even intentional. There's so many things to be careful of. So, I think that's huge for all of us. And then on stage, backstage, who here has ever been involved with theater or connected to somebody that's been in theater? Okay. All right. Would you like to describe what's the difference between on stage and backstage? If we had no idea what theater was like on stage and backstage, how would you describe it? The difference?
On stage is almost like going outside of yourself, and backstage is kind of working with yourself. It's almost like you're doing a task, a set task.
Okay.
Whereas on stage sometimes requires going outside of your normal
Okay.
self.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's good. Who else raised your hand back here?
Like you're,
Yeah, good. You're right.
like being on stage is like you're serious, you're in the spotlight character. Backstage, like you can be like your normal self. And
Yes. Do you guys, I want you to take those illustrations and think about your jobs now as a people serving professions. When you're with your customers and your community members and your clients and whoever you're connected with, whoever you're serving, are you on stage or backstage? You're on stage, yes. And backstage is super, super important as that balance of, work life and personal, because I can tell you with our business development department at Bowen Health, we have Monday morning meetings every Monday, and that's our backstage. That's our time to talk about last week and what went well, what didn't go well. And then this coming week, this is what we have on my calendar, and we laugh and we cry, and sometimes we get angry and frustrated, all those things. But those are so important when it comes to that balance of, your workplace and just really having that backstage time. Because if not, if you're always on stage, then you can get into that area of those risks that we talked about. And then, practice kindness and mission. Think about your mission. Why do you do what you do, right? Why, sometimes we'll ask that. We'll actually have people write it on an index card. And sometimes somebody will say, my mission is to retire. It's like, I think they lost track of why they were doing what they were doing, right? it's interesting. Have you ever had somebody in life say something to you that always stuck with you? I had a professor in college that said something that just stuck with me. And she said, to have a job, just to have a job, doesn't equip you as much as to have a job that is your calling, that's your purpose. Because when it's your calling and your purpose, that equips you to handle what the job brings, versus to have a job that's not so much in the area of your mission. Why do you do what you do? And just to think about that. And then, like we talked about the physical, how often you bathe, how often you brush your teeth, all those things. Let's think about, okay, that's the same importance on the emotional side as well, to think of how often should I do a digital detox? How often should we do the backstage as cohorts together? How often should I really think about, why am I coming to work? Why am I doing what I'm doing? How often, the whole idea behind this is to, think about the physical and the emotional, and how the emotional is just as important as the physical. All right, social. Have family support. I always like the four-legged table, the supports that we have in life, especially with people who are high-risk suicide, because I've worked with hundreds of them since I've been at Bowen Health. And it can be the difference between life and death for some people. And so if you think about your natural supports, who are some natural supports that help you with your overall wellness in your life? Family? Pets? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I was in Ivy Tech event a few weeks ago, and usually when we're out and we see the emotional dogs, the emotional support dogs, I turned and I looked again, and there was a pony. I'm like, oh my gosh, it was an emotional support pony. That's great, but it's important. And that's so true, and especially in crisis and trauma, to have people love their actual, there's facts that people's heart rates actually go down if they're comforted by, having an animal. So, but huge. But yeah, just think about, we got family, we got friends, maybe we have pastors, maybe we have animals, and think about them as important as a leg on a table. If you have a four-legged table, in life, we have people that come and go a lot, right? That's just part of life. And if that natural support has had to move on for some reason, make sure you replace them, because if you lose that leg, the whole thing can fall over. That's how important people are in our lives. So, and then, add healthy relationships and limit toxic relationships. We all have probably both. You mentioned that back there, it can be a positive and a negative, right? Yeah, absolutely. And, just knowing, your balance, is it affecting your overall wellness? So, and then often too, this is where counseling comes in and is a huge support when we really are trying to figure out how to balance, especially the toxic relationships. And then workplace, peer support, brief vacations versus vacations. What do you think the difference is?
Long weekend versus a week off.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Sometimes we can't take the long vacations we would love to take if you're a vacationer, right? But that doesn't mean that you can't take some long weekends and do something special. And you can even think in this area as well is kind of like little brief vacations, like at work, like during the day. What's some ideas of some things that you do during the day if you're feeling overwhelmed, or you're tired, or your emotions are high, something happened that upset you. What are some little brief periods of little vacations that you can do during the day, little breaks? Anybody practice anything?
Take a walk.
A walk, yes. Walking is huge.
I would like to go to the shop instead. It's very well.
Agree?
That's got
I was gonna say, Amy, you ready to get on the budget?
Absolutely. That's what I usually do when I find myself that I've stood around or I've sat around a computer way too many hours. You know, I look, it's like, oh my gosh, I've been sitting here for 4 hours when you go to get up and it hurts, you know? I'm like, I need to go down the other end where the cool little ice machine is, that crunchy, you know, ice that you love to put in your ice water. So, but yeah. And then, you know, transitions. Sometimes we go through transitions, sometimes expected, sometimes unexpected, you know, and how we deal with those. And then, you know, boundaries again in toxic environment. We talk a lot about that. And then, you know, practice quitting. Sometimes if we're in the habit of doing something that doesn't really contribute to our overall wellness or someone else's overall wellness, you know, sometimes it's hard to just cut that off right away. So just small steps and practice that. All right, and then under the physical, does anybody have any standing stations here at work? No, or a way that you can stand more than sit? No. Okay, that's one thing that people do. We talk about walking and breaks, you know, meetings, you know, Fitbit challenge. Anybody keep track of your steps? What's the advantage to you of keeping track of steps?
Well, we have a step thing for the wellness thing, so that's helpful.
Oh, nice.
So I know we set, and then it helps me to know whether I'm actually moving enough or not. So
Okay.
10,000 steps close to it, then you're like, I may not be able to have time to exercise, but I'm not just walking.
Exactly. Yes, yes, yes. Very good. Back here?
So mine tells me when it's time to stand up. So like if
Oh.
I've been sitting for too long,
Really?
it will go off and say, time to stand up.
Time to stand
Then
up.
I'll make sure they get up and it hurts. And
Yeah, right.
even if I just walk out front where it sounds like a girl's a little bit or whatever, go back to something, but I try to make sure that I
Yeah, is that an app? That you
can. It's my Apple Watch. It's
Okay.
fitness.
That's great. So that way it kind of helps hold us accountable. How about over here? Everybody keep track of your steps? Yeah. What advantage does that have on your life? Keeps you motivated. Yeah, yeah. And paying attention, kind of like they were saying over here, it helps you just to pay attention more. Yeah, absolutely. And then of course, you know, water contributes so much. And you know, the coffee, the caffeine, that's important too. Yeah. But you know, staying hydrated affects our brain, it affects the way we're able to function, it affects how we feel, it affects our physical wellness. Water, if you can drink it, is super, super important. And then also too, just look for substitutes. Look for things that, you know, are more personable to you, that help you. And then our beliefs, you know, our personal beliefs. It goes back that, you know, when we talk about stress, just the way we think about or believe stress has an impact if we live 20 years longer or not. That's just mind-boggling. But you know, your personal beliefs and, you know, how are they affecting you? You know, maybe we talked about the online stuff, you know, maybe you see some information that's bothering. Is it, you know, you know, from a credible source, you know, is it contributing to my wellness or not? And sometimes we think it is, but then lo and behold, we find it's not. So, and then our spirituality or values, you know, we talked about our meaning and our purpose, you know, why we do what we do with our jobs, and that can also fall into our personal lives as well. You know, some of us probably have family, some of us probably have animals, you know, things that we have in our personal lives as well. And then we talked about the negative stress beliefs, but they have an overall impact on how we manage stress. All of these areas, all of these skills, you know, have an impact on, you know, they may seem simple and they may seem, you know, if we don't practice them, it's not a big deal. But when we do and we pay attention, we're intentional about it, it actually can increase our overall wellness. So this is where I like to take some time and open it up to, because we can learn about each other, right? We can learn about the things that we like to do. I know we shared a little bit about earlier, you know, and I wanted to ask a question too. I want to circle back to the beginning. You know, in our society, when we ask somebody about what our profession is. And then, that indicates that do you think our profession defines us 100% of who we are? No, not at all. No. But if those are the common questions that are asked, that's what we believe. And that's where, that stigma can come in as, yes, I have a mission and I have a purpose and I have a reason why I do what I do in my profession, but that doesn't define me 100% as a person. We also have, all the areas that we talked about, your beliefs and your personal life as well. That also defines you as a person. So, but sharing some of your self-care skills, like whenever we did that at the beginning, you guys talked about an interest or something interesting in your life. This is a time to open it up to share something that you do for self-care, so you guys can support each other, whenever you have that small overlap, that healthiness. What does that healthiness look like in your profession? How can we support each other? And one of the ways is knowing, some of our self-care things, so we can check in with each other and say, hey, how's the walking going? Or how's your dog doing? I heard there's a sale on dog toy, or, we can support each other in our areas of interest. You mentioned a special, what kind of drink do you like? That's your favorite?
White milk, non-fat with one extra shot.
A lady who knows what she needs. Might have to write that one down, but yes, absolutely. What else? What are some self-care things that you do for yourself? It can be, maybe, I don't know, I'll open it up to you first. What do you guys think? What would you like your cohorts to know about you so you can help support each other? Read? What do you read?
Maybe that was gonna be the second question.
Yeah.
Like fantasy.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. What else? Anything else over here? Any self-care things you do? Back here, anything you'd like to share? The same? Yeah. Okay. How about you guys over here? Now, come on, ladies. I know I've had some groups share they love to shop, maybe on Amazon, maybe in person. You what?
I like to listen to music.
Okay. What kind?
I want Tracy. I get her going in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She comes in talking about jamming.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Music is important. It really, they say it activates every area of your brain, so that's good for us for sure.
I gotta start everybody's.
Yeah. Well, I just encourage you to continue to share with each other, because that you can help support each other, and that helps your overall wellness in that area of the overlap of being at the healthiest investment risk that you can be when you're balancing life and work. And so on the back table, I have some EAP fact sheets you're welcome to take with you. I also, normally Bowen stress things are foam. These little guys have liquid in them, and they are the most popular stress things. So I brought plenty of those. Please take one of those if you'd like one of those. And then there's also a tracking sheet back there. And so I know we've got a lot of apps and things we can track, but I also wanted to bring some hard copies too if anybody's interested. There's plenty of them back there. So I hope you have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Yep, welcome.
Don't forget to sign it if you haven't.